right, 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for jumping in for this week's Lunch and Learn. This one's all about the history of cannabis products. We're going to go a little bit into the history of cannabis itself, but this one's again kind of more about the evolution of the products themselves, ranging from not just cannabis, but the different ways that we're able to consume it. Now it's not just combustion, there's all sorts of stuff. So we'll jump right into it. As always, guys, we do this video roughly every single week, Wednesday right at noon. This gives you guys a chance to watch this quick little video during your lunch break or at your convenience. It's only meant to be roughly 10 or 15 minutes to kind of give you guys some real snippet of information, again, that we just want to instill to you guys to empower you to just the more education you know, the more information you know in regards to cannabis, the more informed decisions you're able to make. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right into it, and we're going to go over a little bit of history of cannabis right now. So it all started in China. So the first ever documented use of cannabis was in Central Asia, roughly 500 BC. There are some technical accounts that may or may not be accurate, but roughly a lot of people agree that for sure cannabis was definitely used in Central Asia in roughly 500 BC. And of course, based on that time frame, it wasn't mainly grown to just produce crazy psychoactive effects. Therefore, THC levels were quite low. There's some documents of Iran, the country of Iran. They used to smoke hashish around 800 AD. What's really interesting about that, if you look into it a little bit, their religion, their spiritual practice, that does not allow them to essentially have these psychoactive compounds. However, cannabis has always actually been rooting in that's okay. Again, it gets into a lot of religion stuff. That's like its own little thing to look into. I just want to kind of snippet that, but look into that a bit. It's actually very intriguing to see again like why some of these places end up saying okay with it. And it's interesting because here we are now in 2021, and depending on where you lean on the subject, a lot of people are becoming more and more comfortable with it, and there's for different reasons, and we'll get into that. In the early 1500s, Spanish explorers brought fibrous hemp to Europe. So you kind of went from being used in Asia to essentially you eventually see different places, Spanish explorers bringing hemp to Europe. The reason is, again, we get into a little bit. Essentially, it was a very sturdy material. So more than just using it for psychoactivity, in general, it's used for all sorts of textiles. It's used in different materials. It's used in different. Again, in this case, we're talking about shipbuilding. And actually, when the new colonies essentially came about in the Americas, the British government actually was, I believe, putting into law that these new colonies needed to actually grow hemp. Again, it helped with facilitating between the shipbuilding and just general resources and stuff. And I read a little thing here like World War II, ring a bell? Because again, if you know a little bit about history in World War II, they essentially, the United States government as well, they wanted everybody to grow that. And that was kind of like a thing. They basically made it from outlawed to being able, like, not only that, but you're actually, if you had owned a farm, you were, I believe, instructed to grow it, depending on where you were. In ancient India, cannabis was used for stomach and headaches, as well as the labor process, birthing process. Greeks have been noted to boil the leaves in tea. They use this to dress wounds. They also utilize it in steam baths. So you can see that there is essentially a lot of ancient use of this. It's not a new thing. There's a reason why it's been across the use for medicine over time. And a little bit again into India, the early Americas, Europe in general, Spain, and then we got into Central Asia. Essentially in the 30s, this is when things changed dramatically. In 1937, the U.S. passed what's called the Marijuana Tax Act, and that put a ban on cannabis and hemp. And it was actually the first time that it lumped these two plants together, and which is essentially where we still end up with the confusion today between what is the difference between cannabis and hemp. Essentially, cannabis ends up becoming fringe later on, a few years later. During the 1950s and 60s of use, essentially, President Johnson established the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs to help fight the usage of cannabis. This was becoming what the government considered a big issue, as many Americans or different groups were essentially utilizing this plant. In 1970, the Controlled Substances Act was passed and stated that cannabis had no therapeutic benefit whatsoever. Also, due to its potential use for abuse or potential for abuse, it could not be recommended except under strict medical supervision. So again, you have this thing taking place in the 37s with the Tax Act, and then you have the Controlled Substances Act in the 1970s, basically putting a huge stop and kind of halt on how cannabis was utilized in the United States, but also perceived. Keep in mind, it was perceived as, very detrimental to a lot of people, and we're still dealing with a lot of that messaging from earlier on into today. It was in 1976 that a man from Washington, D.C. with glaucoma was taken to court on charges of marijuana use and growing. But after showing the benefits of using that medical marijuana, the court determined that his use was a medical necessity and dismissed his federal charges. This gentleman's name was Robert Randall, and he became the first American to be provided with legal medical marijuana treatment. And essentially, this is where you get the snowball effect of, if you can show it once, a court shows it one time or proves it one time, other states, other entities have the ability to, or have the desire and ability to be able to actually use this as reference and to help kind of push and drive some other stuff. So as time moves on, we get more and more instances and cases and studies, or more court cases end up getting shown to prove different things. It really does have a huge impact in regards to how we're actually making progress, you know, not just in our state, but in the country. Let's see. Sorry, we're on site. In the 80s, in the 80s, again, a few years later, that cannabis was used. You started seeing it being used for cancer and AIDS patients. It was believed to provide pain relief and boosted appetite. Essentially, this is what cannabis has been used for almost since the dawn of its use. It was pain relief. That was one of the hugest reasons why a lot of people end up consuming it. Back, I know China, there's records again of using that, and it was mostly for pain relief. Essentially, Marinol was a drug that was made from synthetic THC, and it was used for nausea, for chemotherapy, and helped stimulate appetite during treatment. Many of you may or may not know about Marinol, but again, as they just say, it's a synthetic THC, which essentially in Marinol does not contain a full spectrum at all. It's which is something we'll get into in just a bit. It was essentially just THC by itself, which seemed to have done quite a bit of good for many, but at the same time, because it's not the whole plant, we actually started to see later on that this was losing the efficacy, and actually in many cases was actually causing more harm than good. Again, that fact, that knowing that, really helped instill the combustion of the flower itself as years moved on. In 1996, California legalized medical marijuana, opening the eventual floodgate for other states to legalize it well. And that essentially leads us to today. Now, we are in there's over 18 states that have legalized cannabis, plus the District of Columbia and various islands within our jurisdiction. And now many other states have decriminalized, also allowed access to medical cannabis in general. So this is kind of what this is about now. This is essentially all about products. It's 2021. We've come a long way from hashish, from just consuming flower, again, boiling those things in leaves. Again, these are really awesome ways that they're able to utilize this plant, but things have gotten quite more, identifiable, if you will, and also more open for everybody to use. As we'll get to see briefly, again, things have changed dramatically to the point where if you may have been turned off, you may not have had an interest in trying it before for different reasons. You say, I do not like smoking, I don't like the smell of it, the taste of it, yada yada. Now there are so many different methods of administration, is what we call them, and forms of medicine that anybody can try it. There's something for almost everybody if, again, this is something you're used to. Pill forms, for example, a lot of people are used to swallowing a pill, so you actually will see a lot of cannabis products nowadays actually made into tablets, or something very small that's ingestible that makes people feel much more comfortable. They're dosed exactly. The thing with combustion cannabis, the flower itself, or even concentrates, is that you may or may not be getting the exact amount that you're looking for. It's really hard to dose micrograms and things like that where you're actually burning a substance versus consuming. And at the same time, even if you ingest something that's 5 milligrams of, let's say, THC, it does not mean that those 5 milligrams are going to act on you or attach to your receptors in the same way that they would have, let's say, a day before, a week before. It really relates to gut bacteria, so much stuff. Honestly, it's much more than just the gut, but there's so many factors that come into play. So I think it's really beneficial for us to know the amount of medicine within an item, but keep in mind that the amount that your body is going to absorb and also use is going to be different day to day, person to person, and for many different reasons. So what do we have now? I kind of just went into it. We have dosed edibles. We have microdosing tablets. We have tinctures of all sorts, whether you're looking for CBN. CBN is great for sleep. CBG is great for the gut. You have products that are heavy in THC and heavy in CBD. You have one-in-ones. Again, getting more of the whole plant medicine. Cannabis was grown for the last 30 years plus or so with the goal in mind of, let's push this THC to the limit. And what essentially that did is it did not allow for a plant to grow to maybe its fullest capabilities. We're just kind of growing it with this one compound in mind, because that seemed to be the strongest effect, that, or people noticed that the strongest effect, cannabis was getting a lot of promotion and use for its psychoactivity. So the more psychoactive you can make your plant, the more noticeable you can make that with somebody. It often became the case that that was the most intriguing thing for them to use. People still hunt THC percentages to this day, but there's really much more to it than that. Heavy THC may not get away, may not relieve your anxiety, it may not relieve your pain. It might actually cause more. If you're looking to essentially, again, your anxiety, you're looking to relieve that, you could heighten it by consuming too much. You're also, the type of product you use could have a lot to do with that. I know ingestibles, many people, when you're consuming cannabis and it acts within the gut, it literally converts to a whole new compound, and it acts on your body quite differently. And I know many people have a hard time relating to that. Other people really enjoy it and they get a lot of benefits out of it. But the psychoactivity of that can change dramatically, and based on the psychoactivity, your experience is overall completely different, to where, again, it could be too psychoactive to where you're not even noticing the pain. The pain hasn't gone away, but the psychoactivity is causing the pain to go away, but now you're disoriented and you can't actually go throughout your day. So you just, basically substituted your pain for your mind space, and understanding the types of products and the dosing could really have a huge effect on understanding that. There's different ways to consume. We just brought in, again, real quick, we'll go right back. There's different forms of concentrates, and this is where the ease of use of items come in. We have some really awesome new products nowadays. For example, I have right here with me what's called the Honey Badger. I'll pull this out. This thing is pretty cool. I know it might look a little wild. This is just a stand for it. Very straightforward though. This product is awesome. It can combust flour. It can combust various forms of concentrates. You can do what's called dab with this thing. This is a nectar collector here, so you'd actually have like a form of cannabis in a dish, and you would heat this coil up, and you would go right to it, and it actually would pull right through here, and it would combust this way. But this is basically as you will, like a mobile, very easy to use tool to basically use combustible cannabis, mainly in concentrate form. That's just an awesome device that exists nowadays that really has like a lot to do with how far you can stretch your cannabis, how far you can actually get with your medicine. Making sure that the temperature and how you burn off, some of these compounds burn off when you're combusting them in a certain way. Too hot, direct flame can actually have a huge impact on the terpenes you're consuming, burning off certain cannabinoids. Everything has its own range of heat that it can withstand. So a device like a Puffco Peak right here is amazing, because it's geared toward essentially setting to a specific number. It's going to combust in cannabis at a very specific point, and because of that, you're actually going to get the most out of that. So that's just an evolution of essentially the product of some of the products themselves, where I'm looking at actual equipment and utensils. This is again something really cool. Definitely not for everybody, but this has gone much farther than a pipe or a bong in general. That we now have devices like this that can be synced with your phone, that can be set to a certain temperature. It can know what sort of product you're using in there. We've done a lunch and learn on the magical butter machine, which is the device that essentially can extract the cannabinoid profile from your flour and put it into lotions, to balms, put it into concentrate form. You can combust. You can put it into tincture form. You can put it into butters. It does a lot of stuff, and that is a product that shows that, again, as things evolve, not only does the cannabis and the medicine from the different types we're able to use, but the products and the methods in which we're able to use those has gone up dramatically too. So you're having this huge, basically win-win on both sides, to where each kind of week, month, and year that progresses, there's, it's very intimidating to some, but at the end of the day, it's really about getting the most bang for your buck for your medicine. If you're spending $50 on, let's say, an eighth of flour, well, then understanding when you should use it, why you should use it, and in what way you should actually use that, because you do not have to just combust that flour. There are different ways to extract the cannabinoids from that. Maybe understanding that could really, again, have a huge impact on your flour use or just your medicine use. Again, this is not a one-size-fits-all thing. You don't go to the doctor here and essentially they write down, okay, you get 2 hits of this type of flour at 8 a.m. every day and your problems are gone. It's not that simple at all. It definitely takes a little bit of due diligence, tracking, journaling, understanding, again, the products and just how everything evolves. Looking at the overall as time moves on, because gummies just came here in the state of Maryland. I know a lot of people have always known edibles and heard of edibles. However, we've never really had the privilege of having them in our location, but so strongly. We've had troches, which essentially mimicked, if you will, gummies and stuff like that, but now we have very specific edibles, so that means they're going to come in all sorts of forms. We've had elixirs and we'll continue to have them, which are drinks drink forms, which a lot of people love and like. It's very easy. Again, you can dose them. Some flavor profiles are important, so they're able to actually make these things taste really good, because I know cannabis actually for many people does not have an enjoyable taste. Because remember, we have to think and consider that people are entering this space every day new, not because they're excited, not because they want to, but some people are here on wit's end. They have tried a bunch of other stuff and they ended up, cannabis is their last doorstep. And, we've had a lot of patients like that. And so we approach them completely differently than somebody if they have already, been in this space for quite some time and they're, looking now to either check out a new vendor, try a new product, get a new device they've never seen. It's all really relative to who that person is. In a sense, any new patient, again, if they're very, let's say, ignorant towards cannabis, we're going to, what I just went over with you guys, that's something that a patient consultant of ours will do in very quick fashion, but at the same time allow themselves to be able to have the chance to speak with somebody. If this is something that you're interested in, you would like to be able to speak further about this, let us know in the comments. We'll definitely love talking about the history of this stuff. We can go into more about some of the devices we have. But all in all, we're 16 minutes in. My name is Brandon, guys. This one was all about the evolution of cannabis products. We got to see a little bit of where cannabis where it started getting derived from, how it made its way over here, what it was used for originally, and essentially now what's going on. I didn't get into apparel and stuff like that, but yep, cannabis is making a huge headway in regards to the other types of products it's making. In regards to textiles, that's back. Hemp shoes, hemp shirts, that's becoming a much greater thing. As time goes on and we start, hempcrete, hempcrete, I don't know if you guys know about that. Look into that. Homes are being built with what's called hempcrete. It's a mixture of concrete and hemp. Temperature, it's basically fire resistant, earthquake proof, the craziest stuff you can imagine. It's cheap, it's durable, it's awesome. This is not the one to get into that, but the cannabis, as this evolves and science starts meeting more and more of these, we know it can be used for infinite numbers of things, as fuel, as clothing again. So as the market starts opening, as laws change, as people's sentiment change, as we keep making videos like this and we're able to educate more people, things will change, things will also evolve, and we'll get to the point where actually you'll see cannabis involved in your life much more. A lot of tables can be made out of this stuff. There's so much in the world that could actually be used from this very fast growing fiber, fast, industrious, and produces a great amount of CO2 in the air, oxygen in the air for us to breathe. It's just awesome, guys. Check this out. There's definitely gonna be more. Next Wednesday, we have our very first in-person lunch and learn. You have to RSVP for that. We have roughly 10 spots, so I know they're filling up quickly. I think we only have 2 left, so if you catch this in time, definitely head over there and RSVP if you can. If it's filled, please send us a message. We'll still put you on a little list. There's a good chance you can still get in, because unfortunately not everybody RSVPs makes it, but we definitely want to have, we're excited to have our very first one. This is something we keep doing online and virtual, and we've gotten a little bit better with them as time moves on. I can't wait to keep doing these. I love doing these, but at the same time, doing them in person is really where the campus comes in and what we want to do. But at the same time, because we do them virtually, we're able to, you can watch them at your convenience, you can watch them whenever you like, and you can share them with those who you love. So guys, as always, this is Graham with Peninsula Wellness. I thank you for tuning in. Again, we're here every single Wednesday, right around 12 o'clock, to give you guys a chance to kind of, again, touch base with us, get some quick information during your lunch break, and hopefully, make you a little bit smarter and make so you can make some better decisions when you come in here, At the same time, guys, I appreciate this. I really do. Take care, everyone. We'll see you all next week in person for our next lunch and learn. Take care.